All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy 2025. We've made it to the new year, which means we have a full year of webinars ahead of us. And what a better way to start off 2025 with talking about your CSA scores. If you've been on our webinars before, you know I have to do my little housekeeping. So real quick, we will be recording this webinar, so don't feel like you have to write anything down. Go ahead, sit back, relax, and enjoy the content. The recording will be made available to you after the webinar. So let's go ahead, start off the year of safety with talking about CSA scores. So there's seven focus areas of your CSA score. The seventh is hazmat. So we're really going to cover the main six that kind of affects everyone today, because hazmat's kind of its own section. But the six areas are your crash indicator, your vehicle maintenance, your driver fitness, drug and alcohol, unsafe driving, and hours of service. So all of these ultimately come together and affect your overall CSA score, which is your safety score given by the FMCSA. So real quick, why CSA scores, right? Why do they even exist? One of the reasons is it helps protect the company reputation. So CSA scores are public. Anyone can look them up, and it's really easy for anyone to see, hey, I don't want to operate with this carrier because they tend to have unsafe, they have a lower or an unfavorable CSA score, and there's a higher risk of an accident while they're executing my load or getting pulled over. It's just a higher risk to operate with this company. It also reduces DOT intervention. So if you're passing a scale, they will look up your DOT number, and if it's unfavorable, you tend to get pulled over in the scales a little bit more and picked on. And then also lower insurance costs. If you have a favorable CSA score, you can leverage that for better insurance policies, better costs overall. So it's really a monetary value to you as well to make sure that your CSA scores are in good standing. So let's go over the individual categories just a little bit more in depth. The first one is your crash indicator. So reflects the company's safety history. Higher scores can mean a higher insurance cost. Things like repeated minor crashes from preventable causes like improper lane changes can be an example. Some of the root causes is a lack of analysis after crashes. So if you have something, a minor fender bender, and you internally as a company are not really doing training or following up on that, that can cause repetitive behavior for your drivers. And then again, with the no follow-up training or corrective action for the involved drivers, can really make it feel like that behavior is okay and not change it. The next section is vehicle maintenance. So it's directly tied to the safety of your vehicles on the road, right? If your wheel's about to fall off, probably not a very safe vehicle to be operating. And also out of service orders during inspection. So if you got pulled over and you are claimed as not able to operate on roads safely, they can put you out of service. So examples of that again, worn brakes, faulty lights, tire violations are some of the more popular ones. Some of the causes is skipping regular inspections, right? Or not taking your driver's DVIRs very seriously when they say that there's a problem. So that can factor into your safety scores, as well as driver fitness. So drivers meeting physical and medical standards to operate a commercial driver's license is very important. Some things that can ding you are expired medical certificates or incomplete driver qualification files. One of the biggest factors of this is just insufficient tracking systems. Some people rely on their drivers fully to just update their medical cards. And sometimes drivers just forget. It's not the forefront of their mind. So as a company, you kind of need to take on that burden and make sure that all of your drivers are up to date on everything and operating with no medical conditions that can inhibit their ability to operate a CDL. Drug and alcohol. So drug and alcohol ensures safety and compliance with DOT regulations. And then a violation can lead to severe penalties and CSA score increases. Things like missed random testing deadlines, no follow-up testing done if there's like a DOT incident, or if they do a refusal or are positive on a drug or alcohol test. And then also just insufficient documentation. So not keeping track of your randoms, not keeping track of your return to duty processes, stuff like that. Some of the key causes for this is just insufficient knowledge. Drug and alcohol is kind of is a beast in its own, understanding the regulations. So just not having sufficient knowledge of what you need to do for your drug and alcohol programs, as well as having bad CRA partners. So a lot of companies really heavily depend on their companies that are running their randoms or are in charge of their randoms, running their drug and alcohol testing. And sometimes just having a bad CRA partner who isn't a partner, is more just a business relationship, can really be detrimental to a company. Unsafe driving. So some of the things like this can affect your safety culture and really endanger the public and the driver as well. So things like speeding, following too closely, improper lane changes that are being documented by and caught by a CHP or DOT officer. Some of the things that can cause this is lack of corrective actions, kind of similar to that collision that we were talking about. Not following up on your driver's behavior or never knowing about your driver's behavior to begin with can really solidify that, hey, this behavior is okay and I can keep doing it under your DOT. The other thing is improper vetting. Sometimes steps get skipped when onboarding a driver if you're not using a software or using a workflow that is foolproof. And sometimes drivers slip through the cracks and they have unsafe driving behavior in their personal vehicles or from previous jobs, and that can come over to the new position that they are in. And so not knowing that ahead of time can cause them to have those behaviors behind your trucks. Hours of service violations. So hours of service, they protect against driver fatigue, right? We want to make sure our drivers are not falling asleep at the wheel. It's very dangerous. So things like drivers exceeding allowable hours, inaccurate or falsified logbooks are some of the violations that we see. Some of these can happen because of pressure to perform unrealistic timeframes. So, we all have deadlines to meet. We all want to get our freight from one place to another as quickly as possible. And sometimes drivers can feel under pressure if they're given unrealistic timelines. Also, ELD restrictions and rules are incorrect. So just not setting up ELDs properly, depending on the way that your company is operating, is another thing that can cause some violations. So overall, what is more of a general cause of all of these violations is one, poor internal communication. So if an event happens and the right person doesn't get notified to solidify that change, then it never happens, right? So the behavior keeps occurring and occurring and you keep getting dinged for it. The other thing is training gaps. So sometimes, again, that lack of knowledge in terms of like drug and alcohol testing, knowing that CSA scores even exist, those training gaps for your admin and your drivers can really lead to, again, the repetitive behavior that keeps dinging scores or, unsafe driving behaviors that can be trained. Another thing that we talked about is those tight delivery schedules. So they want to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. So that can cause some pressure on the driver to maybe skip that random testing that they just got pulled on, or maybe, take something to help them stay awake to meet those deadlines. Stuff like that can be really put a lot of pressure on your drivers and might cause them to make some shortcuts. And then lastly, inadequate tools and procedures. This kind of goes back to the poor internal communication as well. If you don't have a good tracking system and a good way to know that these things are happening, right, then, ignorance is bliss, right? If you don't know it's happening, how do you make corrective action? And then how do you track that action has been corrected and you've talked to the driver or talked to the admin or whoever was the cause of that violation, and you can turn around and say, hey, look, we talked about this 2 weeks ago, you're speeding again, hey, we got to have another conversation here. So having good tools and procedures to track that internal corrective action, that's really a big thing. So why should you care? Why should you even care about your CSA scores? One is obviously safer roads and fewer accidents. These scores were kind of designed to really put the pressure on companies to make sure that they're operating in a safe manner. Lower risk of DOT audits. Again, if you are at a higher risk level, we tend to see that you get audited more often, pulled over more often, pulled off at the scales more often for inspections. So having a favorable CSA score really helps lower that time and then essentially keeps your drivers on the road, which is what we want. Competitive advantage in the marketplace. This kind of goes back to that insurance, and if you are for hire, for example, that companies will want to work with you because you don't pose a risk that your driver is gonna get into an accident, their vehicle is gonna roll over, and then all their product is lost, right? It's damaged. Or you get pulled over at a scale, and now your ability to deliver those products on time has gone down because now you're getting pulled over for inspection. So it just gives you a little bit more of a favorable operating, profile to insurance companies and to others in the industry that need to use your services. And then lastly is driver satisfaction. Oh my gosh, I can't say that word. Retention, right? Happy drivers. Drivers are so very much needed in this industry. It's pretty competitive to get drivers. One of the things that will make a driver probably not want to operate with you is if they're getting pulled over all the time. Every time they hit a scale, they're getting pulled for an inspection. Even if their inspection, they know that they did their DVIR, they know that they're operating at a level of safety and they're hitting their hours of service and there's no violations that they're aware of, nobody likes to get pulled over. Nobody likes to get pulled over and talk to an officer. It's just not a fun event, right? So if that keeps occurring for a driver, they're probably not going to be very happy about that. They want to drive, they want to get on the road, they have a job to do, and anything that kind of pulls, personally, if something was pulling me away from getting a job done, I would be a little irritated as well. So we want to keep those drivers happy. And then the biggest reason is it can get your company shut down. I mean, having an unsafe or unfavorable CSA scores ultimately can lead to your company getting shut down. If they go and have enough audits and show that you are really not taking safety seriously and not operating in a way that you should be, they could close your operations down permanently. So how to fix it, right? How do we look at these CSA scores and be like, how do I make sure that these are okay? So the first thing to do is internal audits. You have some processes in place, just make sure that those are being followed, things are being collected properly, and just do some check-ins with those that are in the line of communication for when events happen. Another thing is just check your CSA scores. We've been in business for 25 years, and a lot of the times when we're talking to carriers, they go, CS what? They don't even know what their CSA score is or what it even encompasses. So go to the CSA site, check your scores, take a look at them, and we'll kind of dive a little bit more into that as well on the next slide. But another thing is use the right tools. If you are using an Excel spreadsheet that can get duplicated and resaved and lost and deleted, and or email communications, that's how things get lost. When there's too many pieces to look at, that's how things get missed, don't get entered correctly, the correct actions aren't taken. So use the right tools to track your driver's behavior and track those trainings and conversations that you have. And then lastly, have good training programs. So have a good partner in place that does training to make sure that your trainings are actually going to stick with those who take them. And it's not just a, hey, yeah, I read that, I signed off, and move on, and then they repeat the behavior. So having a good partner or having good internal training programs is a really big thing as well. So back to actually checking your CSA scores. So this is what your CSA, the front page, essentially, of what your CSA score would look like if you were to search up yours or anyone's DOT, right? Because it is public information. So there's some things, this is just a brief screenshot. If you scroll down, it gives you a lot more information to, the exact violations, the scoring that goes with the violation. There's a lot of information that you can find if you play around on the site. They give you some graphs about, hey, you had a peak this month, and it's really cool information. So I really encourage you and your team to take a look at your CSA scores, and really check for, really just see what it looks like, one, if you've never taken a look at it. Also compare to the national average. They give you national average percentage versus your percentage, so you want to make sure that you're not above that for the violation. Some other things you want to check is for duplicate violations. It happens. Sometimes people get dinged twice for the same thing. That's not good because it's going to affect your overall score. Other things like incorrectly reported violations. So you're like, hey, that never happened. My driver, that truck wasn't even on the road on that day. Like, this is not correlated to my DOT at all. That's another thing you want to check for. And then also proper classification. So just make sure that it's being scored properly. They're not giving you a higher rating than higher or lower, depending on what category it is, because everything's scored a little differently. But just make sure that it's classified properly, so you're not getting getting points for an event that wasn't as severe as they're rating it. So say you go through all these steps and you find a duplicate or you find an incorrectly reported violation. What do you do? How do you take care of that? Because we want our scores to be as accurate as possible. So what you're going to do is you're going to submit a data queue. So you can go onto the FMCSA website and go in and do data queues. That's kind of a whole thing in itself, but essentially it's a way to protest against violations that are incorrect, aren't yours. You see something that's not right on your CSA scores. So if you have more additional questions about data queues, our consultants are more than happy to have a one-on-one conversation with you about those more specifically, but it's very easily done on your own. So one thing that we kind of touched on was having the right tools, right? So what is the role of technology? And really good technology should simplify the tracking and reporting of what you're the information you're trying to get. So So here's some examples of some really good tools that can help with your CSA scores in particular and just your overall safety for your drivers. So we have DQM, DQ file management, and then the MVR and CSA monitoring. That is a really big thing that is offered with DQM. And so you are real time, given updates on when events occur, when a driver is in an accident or gets a citation, even in their personal vehicle. Gateway is fleet management, so you're able to keep track that your permits, your licenses, your titles, registration, all that stuff is up to date, so it doesn't give an officer a reason to pull you over. Zendue is a great camera system to kind of track your driver's behavior to make sure that there's not distracted driving that is causing crashes, unsafe driving, stuff like that. Whip Around is really good on the maintenance side, maintenance scheduling, preventative maintenance, so you don't get dinged on those maintenance scoring. And then Geotab is a great ELD. It's compliant and it gives you a lot more than just hours of service. There's a lot of good data that you can grab from them as well. So let me see if I have a Q&A in here. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A. I'll try to answer them as best as I can if this will load. Do you offer training? What services are available to help us with data queues? Yeah, so I kind of touched on this a little bit. So we as consultants have done data queues for our clients before. So it is something that we can definitely help with. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about data queues and, knowing how to handle them, our consultants are more than happy to schedule some time with you to talk through your operations, look at your CSA scores, and kind of go a little bit more in depth in that. Okay. What tools are available to help us ensure our drivers perform pre-trips and post trips? Yeah, so there's some tools out there that are really great for companies to utilize. I don't know any of them off the top of my head, but again, if you need something specific, if you have a specific problem that you keep getting dinged on or something, something that's causing a problem over and over again, our consultants are more than happy to take some time to sit down and really understand your operation as a whole to get the right tools in front of you so you can make that decision on whether you want to implement it into your everyday operations. Whip Around is one that offers pre-inspections. So if there's an issue, the driver in real time can upload a picture to their maintenance team. And so they know that, there's a record taken, it's in real time, and things can get fixed a lot quicker. So having that right tool for discussion, that communication is really, really big. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, thanks for joining us for the first webinar of the year. What a great webinar to start off with, talking about safety scores. 2025 is the year of safety. Again, the recording is going to be made available to you via email as well as on our LinkedIn, YouTube, and on our website, dqmconnect.com. So thank you again for joining. Remember to stay safe, stay compliant, and keep driving success. Thank you so much.